things don't get announced, but I am renewed for a new season, or new 5 seasons, as it were. Yeah. So it's there, and if you want to do it, if you miss it, or whatever the case may be, things don't get announced, but I am renewed. I will turn that off. So you fans at home, if conceivably, if you don't want to be seen, then you have to then you have to turn off your camera. But nobody like Temple Shalom's YouTube page and watches hour-long classes on Torah like for nefarious purposes. Out there, that's not right, exactly. And is it a cliffhanger? Right. So we get to jump in. So I do think about like what to teach, and I do think that Torah like is like the basic thing of it is like, one, it's a groundwork for everything else. 2, there is, you might know, like Avot says, that turn it over because everything is in it. So the idea is that everything is in this, and you can use this stuff as leaping off points for all the issues like in the world or in Jewish life or whatever it might be. So a deep dive into the book of Genesis from the beginning, not Parshat HaShavua, not going each week through the portions. If you only go each week through the portions, you take 1 week with Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and then you have 1 week on skin diseases in Leviticus. And in reality, like, it's better to do lots of time on Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and maybe not equal time to skin diseases in Leviticus. Right. So that's an actual thing. So instead of like going over everything, like and giving equal times to the boring parts, like I want to hit the interesting or meaty parts and go deep. All right, before I give a full introduction, I want we should like make sure that people know each other, because there's the idea we can like set up the room however we want, I guess, and you can sit at the table if you want to sit at the table, but we should introduce ourselves. Say your name, what brought you here, not make and model, but what brought you here. If you remember your bar bat mitzvah Torah portion, if you were denied one, or if you never had one, or you don't have to, but like that, no, is there a favorite biblical character, one you like the best? And again, if you don't have one, you don't have to. I'm Rabbi Dan. I thought it'd be fun to do a deep dive into Bereshit, as I just said. And my bar mitzvah portion was Bereshit, now that I think of it. It was actually November 1st, a number of years ago. Joseph is my favorite biblical character. I literally tear up when we hit the Joseph cycle of stories every year, and he reconciles with, after like 20 years of estrangement and hatred with his family, they reconcile. It gets me every time, like the idea that people can reconcile after years of hatred. So that we should go around and introduce ourselves, and this name, what brought you here, bar bat mitzvah portion or was denied or never, and favorite biblical character. Yeah. Nice.
Nobody's talking.
Right. So, oh yeah. So this doesn't work. Can I have people like pass around the computer so people on Zoom can see? Michelle just introduced herself. Can I do that? Is that legit? You're all right with that? I don't know. Like, I don't think people need permission for things.
Or you could just put it over here so it gets decided, and then we'll turn it that way.
So as you like. There we go. And I'm going to repeat to a certain degree. Yes.
Okay.
Where's Michelle? There you go, Michelle.
And there.
We got Michelle's shoulder.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Bonnie Bernstein. And I'm here kind of tied into some of why you're asking for the introduction. So I was not bat mitzvahed. I have no portion. And I don't have a favorite part of the Bible because I never really learned it. I was brought up with the culture and the tradition, but not necessarily the learn. I'm here to learn.
That's awesome. One part of what I like about that is like the biblical phrase for somebody not in a state is that we have no portion. So like when you say I have no portion and I think that about this, like really like it, like the resonance is like not having standing. So like I like the idea of here, like giving them standing, like proper standing to you.
Okay.
Hello, everybody here and those viewing at home. My name is Drew Rosenzweig, and I am here because we had previously taken a class for probably a year and a half or 2 years, something like that. A few years back, way before COVID, and I've never been very knowledgeable, I would say, in my Judaism, but I enjoy the different facets of it and the discussion, and it helps me feel connected to my religion and my background. I was bar mitzvahed on September 11th, 1982. The name of the portion, but if you are all interested, one of my co-bar mitzvah people, because I was one of 4, sent me a video recording of it.
Nice.
Just this past September, so we can all
And
dive
we
into that in
watched
another
it.
class if you want to hear it.
After the suit, nice.
Did it nice.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Allison Rosenzweig. I am here because I too want to learn more about Judaism and our past and our history and make connections with today's world. I was bat mitzvahed many years ago. I don't remember my Parsha, but I will say that I remember that I had a twin in Russia and that was meaningful for me.
Me too. Yes.
Me three.
Yeah, that's another like resonant thing, like when you think of like, there's a, like, oh, that's all past. Okay. Not anymore.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And,
Linda, Arrow. My portion was Eshala, Deborah,
nice.
and what was nice about it, I was one of the first girls in the conservative movement to go to Hebrew school and to have a bat mitzvah. I've taken classes with you before, and I'm very happy to be here.
Nice.
And I don't have a favorite character.
Right. There's a lot, longest top car of the year. So,
Well, I only did, because it's Sephardi and it's Ashkenazi, I only did one.
I get that for me.
You want to hold it? You want me-
I got it.
All right, thanks. I'm Dan Cowan.
Just keep it short.
Okay. So I actually drove it in Genesis here, so I guess that's finished.
That's commitments. You leave it in Exodus, then we'll.
So I really haven't had much connection to the temple since COVID, so I figured this was kind of an opportunity since COVID is somewhat lessened. In terms of my Haftarah, I just remember it started off with Yomer Yirmiyahu. So Jeremiah said, I don't remember much after that.
Right. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Kirshner. I was bar mitzvahed with 2 other people, so I didn't have a Haftorah portion. It was the smallest Haftorah portion, so they did leave things up. And I had just a Torah reading, so. I'm here because I enjoy learning with Rabbi Dan. I've taken a number of classes with him, and my favorite character is David because of his complexity.
Hi, and I'm Lynn Kirshner. I'm here because I love Rabbi Dan's classes, and I also want to learn everything I didn't learn in Hebrew school. I did have a bat mitzvah. It was on a Friday night. I don't remember the portion, but I do remember that it was a blizzard. January in northern New Jersey. And, yeah, I don't think I really have a favorite character, but I probably, would say David as well.
Okay, I'm Joe Weinstein. Also, I'm here, love to learn, and this has been a great venue for several classes that I've taken. Wonderful teacher, wonderful discussion. That's what brought me here. As far as remembering my portion, I can't remember my portion, but also I can remember the first like 2 lines of my Haftorah was Vayomer Shmuel Elhan. I think it was in numbers. Portion was in numbers, but remember the Torah portion itself. It's funny what sticks. And I wish I had more time to come up with a favorite biblical character or personality. David popped in my mind, personally. But you make a strong case for Joseph, my namesake. But I'm going to reserve judgment. I want to give that a little bit more thought.
All right. We've got, there'll be options by the time we're finished.
Right.
I'm Wendy Offen, and I'm here also because I enjoy the rabbi's classes. I was not bat mitzvahed. I had a confirmation at the center because girls did not get bat mitzvahed. The rabbi wrote our parts.
Nice.
We didn't even get to do it, and we were 15 girls. I remember it distinctly. I don't think I have a favorite biblical character, but my father was David, so.
I'm Steve Offen. My bar mitzvah portion was Parsha Noah. And as a result, I've always liked Noah because, if I recall, paraphrasing, the portion starts off by saying Noah was a righteous man in his time. And it really speaks to me because it has a lot of different meanings about what it means. Is he really a good person or was it a terrible time? And by those standards, he was a good person. So I often found that very intriguing and very much contemporary, that people should be judged by their standards of the time. I'm taking the course because I've had others with Rabbi Dan and I've enjoyed them immensely. And I'm sure I'll do the same here.
Thank you. I do that even with the young woman who has a bat mitzvah tomorrow. For its Parshat Noach this week, and all right, he's a good man in his time. So what does that mean? If I say you're a good basketball player for an 8th grader, like what does that mean? Does that bring it down a bit, that qualifier, bring it up? No. What if you're the best student in the worst high school in the state? Does that mean that in a fancy pants high school you wouldn't be so great? Or does that mean if you can do well in this terrible setting when no one else is trying, all the more so if you plant you in a good setting where like everyone else is trying, like you'd really shine. And that it really it does, like you see the click when they're like, oh, context. It really, yeah. That's Noah. They argue about that one. Do people online want to introduce themselves?
Okay, I'm Carol Brown, and although I've been a member for like 50 plus years, we've been going to Florida so that I really attend the temple down there more so than over here. And I've been taking classes down there with the rabbi, but I haven't taken any with you. And I'm very eager to see, how things go here.
Good. So I
really
did
admire
before you log down, Carol. If you want me to go head to head with a Florida rabbi, you can fly me down.
Just retired. He is the only Russian rabbi in this entire country. He grew up in a communist country and became a rabbi here, which is phenomenal.
I think
he's
I'll
very
defer.
well known. You may know him. I don't know, but he
If
just retired.
If he's a big tall guy, Linda Giro knows who he is.
He's a big guy. Yeah, he's retiring to Israel, where he's going to work with Russian Jewry and making them more Jewish. So I've been fascinated with his classes because he gives everyone a perspective that I never had, because I learned the Bible as a child And I really didn't understand the depths and the personalities in the way that he explained them. So I really feel that there's a need to do this for adult education. It's a very important thing for people to actually appreciate the Bible.
Awesome. We'll try and hit on those things. I think this will work then. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sonny Feynman. I've taken rabbi's classes, and I got to say, you're absolutely wonderful. And the books that you have recommended have just been spot on. It's, once again, I'm taking this class as a search to understand more of the Torah and get in depth with the Torah. I was bar mitzvahed. I don't remember. I do remember the party afterwards, but I'm sorry, I don't remember the Parsha or the Haftarah. I wish I did though.
Nice. Thank you, Sonny. Laura, Gail.
Should I go next? I'm Gail Skolke. I'm actually not a Temple Shalom member, although I have been studying with a lot of you for more than 20 years. Kind of started with Jewish Life, when Jewish Life came about. I've been all over the board when it comes to different parts of Judaism. When I was a child, across the street from my public school was an Orthodox temple. So that made it easy for my mother. She did not have to drive me. So that's where I went to Hebrew school. And of course, I was in a Bas Torah class, but there were no bar mitzvah, girls. I was married in a conservative temple, and now I belong to a reformed temple. Hillsborough. I like a lot of Torah study. About 8 or 9 years ago, for the sisterhood at my temple, I started a women's Torah talk group, so that the women could have a say in studying this. I'm not a Torah scholar, I just organized the group. And so I'm always looking forward to learning new things. I love to learn. I think that the two favorite parts of Judaism is learning and doing Israeli folk dancing. Thank you.
Nice. We have the idea for the end of the year party already. Thank you, Gail. Laura, Jonathan, either you want to talk? You don't have to.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Weiss. These are my associates. Evie, say hi, Evie.
Hi.
And this is Henry.
Hi.
We are doing some emergency Halloween shopping, so we are not going to be in person.
Like
Very sorry about that. But we do very much enjoy. I'm sorry, I missed what the questions were. We've been members since about 2015, I think. Both my kids are in Nitzanim, which they love to death. I mean, I can talk about that all day. We love the synagogue, and in particular, Rabbi Dan's the evening adult classes we've done in the past have been excellent. We really liked being there. We really like being there in person, and also the Saturday morning. I also highly recommend. It's very good if you like learning on a Saturday morning. And I don't know what else would you like to know? We have a great time at the synagogue. We love it, and we think we think very highly of the classes. And Rabbi Dan, we're very much looking forward to the class.
Thank you. All we need to know is if the Kit Kats are on sale.
Do they sell Kit Kats at this aisle? I don't know anything about that.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Just pay attention to the kids. Laura, did you want to talk, or you're looking for?
My name is Noah Pratt. I'm also very happy that Rabbi Dan is going to help us see more, understand more than we do by just reading the Torah portions. There is more to it many times, historical and so on, and religious. So I'm very happy that you are going to help us understand the Torah better. Of course, I'm very old, so in my younger years, there was no question about a girl reading from the Torah. I mean, that was completely unheard of. But of course, I'm very happy that things have changed because women are just as much part of creation as men, and they should understand everything.
As we're about to learn, yes.
Yes. So thank you for making
You're
it.
welcome. Thank you. That's Laura Prague. She did not have a bat mitzvah. She, if I may, had to be kinder transported out of Germany. So,
Ooh,
so it's an honor to teach and learn with you. All right. So Torah, the reason to start, I'm gonna thank you for all of that and for the ideas that we can. Oh, Myron. Yeah. Yeah. Boaz. Right. Good one. Right. Nice. So that, by the way, so that's a great thing, which is part of the joy of Torah study and in depth and detail is that it mines and undermines itself, which is to say, like there'll be references one thing to the next. David's descendant is Boaz, who marries Ruth, who's a Moabite, seems to be forbidden to marry. And it is that forbidden relationship that yields you David, and from David you get the Messiah, right? So it's the forbidden thing that somehow gets you the Messiah. So when you encounter something that you don't like, why do they have this prohibition on marrying this entire class of people? If you keep reading, you see that somehow redemption comes through that very prohibited class of people. So again, the Torah will often undermine itself, and that's part of the joy of it, which is that that if something doesn't work, you hang around for a while and it might change. Torah, there's a lot of like, what is it and things like that. What I want to do by way of introduction is to make sure that we have a feel for what we're doing. And that is, I want to look at this, both what it's saying. The questions are always is, what is it saying? Why is it saying it? Why did they write it that way? And what does it mean to them? What does it mean to me? What's being said? What is it saying? Why are they saying it? What does it mean to them? And what can it mean to me? Hi, David. I'm gonna keep playing along there, but so the idea is to ask questions about like what is going on in the text. The way to read it, I think, is to read it multiple ways. You have to do multiple levels at once. This is some of you might be old enough to get the reference. This I compared to this scene in that they would have on the Ed Sullivan Show, when they would have the person come on and spin plates on top of like broomsticks, and you got to spin the plate over here, and then you forget the one over here. You got to run over and get that. Get that. You need to keep multiple things moving at once when you study Torah, and by that I mean you have to keep in mind this is a text with a particular history that came out of a particular time, and it is also a classic of world literature. And it is also the foundation of our sort of religious understanding of the world. And it also is sort of like the source of Jewish and world self-understanding in many ways of religion. And you have to keep all of those spinning at once. If you only look at it academically as why did the culture produce this, then you'll learn that, and that's good, but you'll never like get religious and spiritual reflection out of it. If you only look at it through a spiritual lens and say that, well, how does this teach me about God? You'll never learn fully about the historical setting that it takes place in. It really is, and again, it could be appreciated literature and all that. So it really is all of that at once, and all those plates have to be spinning at once. So it's not easy, and we'll do all of that. There are more plates that are spinning out there, which is the bare sense of the text. What is it saying? And then what it says is often not how it's understood, which means that the commentators and Rashi and the rabbis of the Talmud, and the rabbis of the Midrash, add in layers of meaning that may or may not be in the original text, but that might be how we actually understand it, or how Jews understand it traditionally. So there's also understanding what's written, and understanding at the same time that what's written isn't always like how we've read it. So understanding both of those, so there's multiple layers going on, and that's part of why we're not going to be going fast, because there's fascinating, because the idea is to like mine it, and it's a strange text. The next thing is that it's weird, and Robert Alter, in his introduction to his translation, not by name, but more or less attacks the translation that we use and the dominant translation in the Jewish world, which is the JPS, the new JPS translation, which is what's in the Eitz Chaim and elsewhere. The Jewish Publication Society out of Philadelphia did the first American Jewish translation of the Bible, the whole Tanakh, the Torah, etc., in 1917. That's in public domain, but that has all the thou shalts and thou mayest giveth and all the fake Elizabethan English. They did an updated normal American English translation in the 60s, updated in 85 and subsequently, and that's the one that's used here. And it's good in that it gives you a sense of the text. But Alter probably, Robert Alter is a professor at Berkeley who did a one-person translation of the Tanakh, the only one-person Jewish translation of the Hebrew Bible into English that he completed 2 or 3 years ago. I'm sure, yeah. I mean, not to use us and them, but there are more of them than there are of us. So yeah. So I'm sure actually I can tell you there are. Martin Luther comes to mind. So lots of Christian translations into different languages, but Alter did a Jewish one, and it's good. He, by the way, is coming to Rutgers in the spring. Actually, in late April after Pesach, I'll be away, but I saw that Robert Alter is coming to speak as a guest at Rutgers. He's a great Bible translator, and I think he's speaking about Bible translation, so that'll be totally worth going to. Late April, I'll give you an update then. Alter takes our translation to task for doing the great sin of a translator, which is explaining. In other words, our translation, when there's a problem, when something's unclear, will make it clear. When something's unclear in Hebrew, it'll make it clear in English, which means that you can read it straight through, but you don't know that there was a fork in the road and that you took a fork. Does that make sense? So it's like a news article where sometimes a newscaster or whatever will tell you what you think about the story or what you're supposed to think. Translators do that too. And this translation sort of does that. So you can read it, but you don't always know that there's an opinion being given. Yeah. So there's a few things. He actually, Alter, fascinatingly, in his introduction, says in the end, he thinks that King James is the best translation, even though it's rife with errors. So one of the differences that all Christian translations, especially King James, where it's pre-modern niceness to each other, Christian translations translate with the idea that this is a story that is leading up to the birth of Jesus and the salvation of the world through Jesus. So everything is translated with an eye to that. So that's fine, but it's not a Jewish perspective. So they'll translate and they'll try and hint to that direction. King James, the advantage is it's the best English out there, meaning that it's poetic. It's like Shakespeare. It's influenced the entire language of, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was unformed, and like that. All of the King James's phrases, in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. They're part of our culture. They're beautiful and they're lovely and all that stuff. But it's not as accurate as modern translations because we know more than the King James translators did. They have us on poetry, but we can compare things. They were limited, they don't know what certain words meant because they couldn't know, because they didn't have access to the libraries that we have access to. We have access to ancient Semitic languages. We have access to more parallels in Arabic than the King James translators have, or more parallels in ancient Ugaritic. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have more things to compare to, so that modern translators will look at lot of different things and to decide what a word means. And obviously, as you know, in the ancient world, not even the ancient world, not that long ago, you're limited to what was in the library in the city that you lived in. We have every library in every city, like at our fingertips. And that makes a difference to translators who have more that they can draw from. So our translations can be more accurate, but King James 1 is more beautiful. And 2, retains some of the weirdness. It doesn't do the explaining that modern Jewish and Christian Protestant Catholic translations sometimes do, where they'll read smoothly, but it's not, the Hebrew doesn't read smoothly. So the English shouldn't read smoothly. So which brings me to, what book should you use? You should bring a book. You can use the Eitz Chaim, which I just bashed, but it's nice, it's good, and it's accurate. It's a good translation and things like that. You can just use it and just take one of the things from the back of the room. The Tanakh, you know, the blue or aqua-ish Jewish Bible that many homes have is the same translation. So that's out there. You can just go on Sefaria.org online and they'll have a bunch of different translations there for you. So you can just do it on a phone or an iPad or whatever. I like Richard Elliott Friedman as well. Richard Elliott Friedman in the late 90s did his own translation and commentary. He was a scholar at UCSD and then at Emory, and he's one of the preeminent biblical scholars of the day from a secular perspective, though he also goes to Camp Ramah to teach people in the summer times. And he does a nice translation that's loyal to the Hebrew. And when he makes a choice, he, like Robert Alter, will make a choice and he'll note it in the footnotes, which is to say, I could choose this word or that word to translate this. Either one is good. I'm choosing this one for this reason. So in other words, like when there is a fork in the road, he'll make you aware of it. Both Reform Tanachim are also good. This one, there's a woman's commentary on the Torah. This is put up by the Reform movement. And this one gets rid of all the gendered mentions of God's name. So there aren't any he's and his and things like that. Uses God's pronouns are God, right? So it's not he said, it's God said. That's a good one. Everett Fox, I also like, also late 90s. He teaches at Park in Worcester. And he does an unusual translation, which is his translation pulls on the tradition of Martin Buber and Franz Rosenzweig, no relation, I'm guessing, who were luminaries in pre-war Germany in the Jewish community. Rosenzweig is a philosopher who's still studied, and Buber the same. For Buber was hounded out by the Nazis and had to move to Free State Palestine. But they translated the Torah into German, and they did it trying to retain the Hebrew idiom. And so Fox translates according to their principles, Buber and Rosenzweig's principles, into English. So it has the rhythm of Hebrew and not the rhythm of English. So it's weird in that it doesn't read like English, but it reflects sort of how Hebrew works. And he retains like all of the original names, like the instead of translating names like Abraham, doesn't become Abraham, it stays Abraham and things like that. So this is a nice one too. Art Scroll also is good. This is an ultra-Orthodox translation. You can buy it with the Rashi if you want. Art Scroll translates according to Rashi. That's in the introduction, they'll say, we translate according to Rashi, which means that when they come to a fork in the road, if Rashi, the great French-German commentator from 1,000 years ago, what he said it means is what it means, period. So sometimes you'll be like, wait a minute, that's not what it says in the words, but you can look and this is what Rashi says it means. So it's an accurate, so it's a nice translation. It reads smoothly and it lets you know it's sort of like how they get rid of problems in the text that sort of like contradict Orthodox understandings. But it's fascinating for that. The great example of Art Scroll translations I'll throw in here in the book of Joshua. And when the Israelites invade the promised land, the first thing that the spies who sneak into Jericho do is they visit a zonah, which is Hebrew for prostitute. This is soldiers who have been, on a march for a long time. The first thing they do is they go to a prostitute. And Art Scroll translates it as innkeeper. They went to an innkeeper because how could our great ancestors have done such a thing? So it's a good translation, but every so often, like their ideology, everyone has an ideology. So like again, like this has its own ideology, this has its own ideology. Yeah, everyone does. All of the commentators are translated in the Commentators Bible, which is new from the Jewish Publication Society. This has Rashi and Nachmanides and Ibn Ezra and all the great commentators sort of like in a circle around the Hebrew text, and both the old and new Jewish Publication Society text, so they can argue with each other over it. So this is nice too. It's an expensive one, but any of them work. I'm probably going to use or lean on Robert Alter and Friedman. Robert Alter, again, teaches at Berkeley, translated the entire Tanakh. The reason why he's good is that he has a good ear for the Hebrew, understands the Hebrew well and translates it faithfully, has less of an agenda. He's not conservative, reform, or orthodox or whatever, like or Christian, like where he has where he wants to like push a certain line. And he has an ear for poetry, which is rare in a translator. Sometimes people are good at knowing the Hebrew, sometimes people are good at English, but like they don't have like sort of a sense of good linguistic rhythm. He has a sense of good linguistic rhythm, and he footnotes extensively when his decision-making process. I think either Robert Alter, which can be ordered online, which can be ordered online, even in paperback, or Richard Elliott Friedman. Richard Elliott Friedman, in his introduction, describes this. He's like, I went to classes with the rabbi and sat around the table and we studied Rashi together, but Rashi wasn't asking the questions that the people around the table were wondering about the text. I wanted to write a commentary that people sitting around a table in the synagogue studying Torah would ask. So he literally is writing it, as it were, for you, meaning like the person who has a day job and sort of like wants to learn like what's the deal with this. So he actually has specifically this in mind and has a nice so either Friedman or Alter I sort of like the most. They're both this is part of like a set. There's a different edition that is the single one, but both of them love the dirty and the violent parts, or they don't shy away from the dirty and the violent parts. The way the innkeepers clean it up. Right, exactly. So either of those are sort of the best, and because they go a level deeper.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. That's going to be the Robert Alter, the Hebrew Bible translation with commentary.
You don't. So Alter sells it as either the 5 books of Moses, just the Torah, or the Hebrew Bible, which is the whole thing. The whole thing, it will run you like $75, but like just the Torah will run you closer to 25 or something like that.
So the Robert Alter Hebrew Bible.
Right. The Robert Alter Hebrew Bible is like the whole Megillah, including the whole Megillah. But if you just buy the one that's labeled 5 books of Moses, that's just Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. That will keep us busy for years. So you don't need to go all in. I have both editions because first he published them in bits and pieces, but the single volume Robert Alter's 5 books of Moses is good. It's sold in paperback, and it's the print is slightly bigger than in this one, which is I'm obsessed with print sizes because aging. So it's really, but the translators, part of the trick of translation is, again, that not explaining things. Part of what makes the Torah, like why has it like survived and like remains revered and things like that, is because there are gaps in the text that make it not clear. And it's those gaps that scholars say are like, might be mistakes or errors in the transmission or whatever it may be, but religiously give you an opening to read yourself into the text, because there are because you have to fill in some of the blanks for yourself. So that's where like the religious opportunity, as it were, presents itself, because you have to be like, I wonder why that's missing, or I wonder why that weird detail is there when most other details aren't there. So that. Pause. Questions?
That ambiguity sometimes give it more feel of a living document that can adapt to future times. And with that, do you think that there was intent there?
Yes. So intent,
you can't guess intent.
Yeah. So whether it's accidental or not, it's what creates it's what creates it. But that is, so the like term of art for those are midrashic moments. Like it doesn't really say what the generation of Noah did that was so wrong. That's a midrashic moment. You'd think that would be a big detail. What did they do that was so wrong that caused God to destroy the world? If you were making a didactic book that says, telling like people exactly what to do, you'd say, don't do these things, God hates it. But it doesn't really give you any details on it. So it's this thing where like every generation can like take their worst sins and be like, oh, you know what they were probably doing? This. And that's part of what makes it rich, is that there are weird details that are left out. And that's part of the joy of the text. Right. You can read it that way. We didn't know it's left out on purpose. Who cares? The bottom line is God made this decision. But that's a good one too. Like, so that's an example of it. Some people are like, what was it? Other people are like, who cares? Like it, but that's part of that's when we say that it can lend itself to different legitimate interpretations, that's part of it. And so we'll all say things that are mutually contradictory to each other, and none of us have to be wrong unless I declare us wrong. So that's what gives rise to it. And if you look, the commentators themselves disagree with each other over some basic stuff, and they will call each other out on it, and some of them will do it rudely. They're not always polite. So this, another level. Jews, especially non-Orthodox Jews, American Jews, whatever it might be, often don't want to give themselves over to the text. And I'm going to recommend doing so. The same way you suspend your skepticism long enough when you're watching a movie to cry at the end of the movie, even though intellectually you know these are actors. They're in a studio and there are cameras all around them and they're reading from a script. And this didn't really happen. And even the play acting of it happened 2 years ago or whatever it is. Like still, I don't know, when the Titanic goes down, you can cry knowing that it's all fake, because you've given yourself over to the movie and you know that like the emotional experience of crying at the end of the movie is better than being there. That's so fake. And the guy who sits next to you, like in the movie theater, like, that's so fake, ruins it for everyone, right? So with the text, with the Torah, do the same thing. Like you can intellectually know that this came from a certain time and a certain place and things like that. But like part of the joy in it is like crying at the end of the play or the movie or whatever it is, like or laughing even for that matter. Give yourself over to it and experience on that level. That's how I can like, tear up at Joseph every year, even though, did Joseph really exist? Like not the issue. That's one of the plates spinning. Did Joseph really exist? But another one is, oh, look, reconciliation after years of estrangement. So this. which brings up, pause, does this make sense? So that, by the way, that's true for all prayer, all Torah, all anything. Treat it like a movie. You went to yeshiva and they told you that Hashem gave the Torah on Mount Sinai, and that every jot and tittle, every letter, the 10 Commandments, Mount Sinai, the whole thing, they debate this. And what Moses wrote down what God wanted to say, and then we have an exact copy of that in that closet there. And sort of like standard issue, traditional Jewish belief or traditional Orthodox belief is this: God gave the Torah. As most modern Jews don't have that exact understanding that God gave the Torah, every letter, every word. Whether it's God speaking to us or whether it's us speaking to God, it's one of those two. It's either us reaching up to try and understand God, or it's God trying to have us understand God. Some version of this it's a record of the conversation, and it's always a starting point in the conversation. So however you understand it, like, know that it's part of the conversation. You don't have to understand it one way or the other, but like getting that, like, this is sacred and it's sacred for a reason, that it's like that it's the starting point of our people sort of like trying to understand how we're supposed to act in this world, even if you don't believe that it's sort of like literally Moses taking dictation like a secretary from Kadosh Baruch Hu. Either way, like it's worth engaging sort of on it's like the movie on multiple levels. Even though you know it's an actor, you can cry when when he breathes his last. It's the same thing here, like sort of like buy into like the divine idea, even if it's not how you walk around day to day. Does this make sense? All right, so that we're not actually going to get to any actual Torah today, it seems, but that's by design. What else can I throw in for you? I can do this for 2 more minutes. In the morning, somebody asked, when was pen put to parchment? So I'll give you the brief background of like the timeline of this. Beregel Echad, standing on one foot. Moses, the Exodus, that story, if you put it on a timeline, is about 1300, 1200 BCE. So 3,300 or so years ago, right? That's like, if you were to put that event on a timeline, that's when it would happen. If you like add up all the begats and whatever, that's where you land. The King David is almost exactly 1000 BCE. So that if you're taking a traditional view, Moses writes the Torah. Most university scholars, there's a debate in scholarship as well, as of course there is, but like the broad consensus is that the Torah comes into the form that we know that we have here by the end or around the end of the first exile, the exile from Babylonia. The temple is destroyed in 586 BCE. They return in 514 BCE, and Ezra, it says that when they return to Jerusalem after the exile to Babylon, that Ezra, the scribe, reads the Torah to the people, and it's thought, even in university, skeptical, secular circles and such, that the Torah that Ezra is reading is essentially the same thing that we've got here. So 6th century-ish. Some people put it a little bit later. Some people put it super late, but I have to say, like, when I read the people who put the date super late, usually there's an anti-Zionist polemic that's going on at the same time. So somewhere around 6th century BCE, the scholarly thought, Richard Elliott Friedman has a book called Who Wrote the Bible? That's really who wrote the Torah, that breaks this down. But essentially it's made out of, scholars will say that it's made out of component parts. There is a source, the first chapter of Genesis is a source that reflects priestly concerns, and essentially all of the book of Leviticus is reflect, all the stuff about what goes on in the temple and bring this sacrifice and that sacrifice, and the priest has to wear this, and you read about this on Yom Kippur, all these details, and you're like, oh my gosh, who cares about all these details? The answer is the Kohanim did. Any Kohanim who I'm insulting? Yeah. Oh yeah. So anyway, the Kohanim cared about it, and that a priestly writer, somebody who is deeply connected to the Kohanim, wrote those parts of the Torah that reflect that concern, and they called that author, because we don't have a name. It's like we can say Dave, we call that author P, because it reflects a priestly Kohanic concern, and that there was a tradition from the north of Israel where they would that reflects northern Israelite concerns. And most frequently at the beginning of the stories, they refer to God as Elohim, one of the Hebrew words for God, you know these words, like as Elohim. So they call that the E source because it most frequently reflects concerns of the northern Israelite community. And in the beginning, they refer to God primarily as Elohim, E. And there's a source that reflects the southern Israelites' concern, and it uses from the beginning God's name, Yud-He Vav-He, Hashem, Adonai. Scholars pronounce it Y-A-H-W-E-H. I don't think it's accurate. It doesn't feel Jewish to me, so I don't use it. I'm not offended if you do, but that name, the Yud-He Vav-He name in German, where this work originally happened, would have been transliterated, the Y would have been transliterated as a J, the Yud as a J. So it's called the J source. That's most of the stories in Genesis come from the J source. In the book of Kings, for those of you who studied Kings, at the end of the book of Kings, it says that King Josiah, who lives just before the destruction of the temple, he is the great reformer who does great things to clean up the temple. People are offering idolatrous sacrifices in the temple, and you want the dirty stuff. There were cult prostitutes in the temple where this was part of there were orgastic rituals that were going on there, and the author of the Tanakh doesn't like it. So King Josiah comes in, does these great things, gets rid of all the idols, gets rid of the cult prostitutes in the temple, and cleans everything up. And the Kohanim come back to him. They say, we have found a book of Moses, a scroll of Moses that we had lost in one of the back rooms of the temple. And it says we've been doing all these things wrong, and we have to change our ways and get with the program. And we haven't been doing things the right way. So they fast and they beat their chests and they change their practices, and they say they practice Passover the way they should practice it, where it hadn't been done since the time of Joshua. They finally started doing things right, and people assume that the book that the priests discovered in the back room is in fact the book of Deuteronomy. And that's why if you read Deuteronomy, it reads as a standalone almost. And that's called the D source. And that in the time of the exile, when the Babylonians destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and sent the leadership of the community into exile, that there was a fear of oh my gosh, all of our traditions are going to be lost. And so a redactor called the R source redacts all these things and edits them together in the full. We'll make sure the northern tribes are represented with the E source. We'll make sure the southern tribes are represented with the J source. The priestly concerns will make up the bulk of things with the P source. Deuteronomy, this great book, which was found at the very end, where we find the Shema and all this beautiful language, will be the grand conclusion, and he stitches them all together essentially into the work that we have today. So you'll see Friedman and Alter occasionally refer to the sources, and they're J, E, P, and D, and R as the redactor, and there are different versions of this, but this opinion on the source of the Torah has essentially held sway in universities and in secular circles since about the mid-19th century, really. That's been changed and adapted and refined and things like that, but something like this is a consensus. If you take, if you go to a biblical studies class at a secular university, this is what they teach, or in any non-Orthodox seminary, by the way, this is what they teach. So that all comes in being, again, 6th century BCE. So even if it's not as old as the time of Moses. It's a few hundred years after the fact. Wasn't written last week. The Septuagint, the translation of the Torah of the whole Hebrew Bible into Greek, exists in the 2nd century. So we know that it had to be way before that, because in the 2nd century, they had something they called the Torah that everyone agreed was the Torah, and that they thought was sacred and had to be translated into Greek. So we know it was way before then. So that is the shortest history of how the Torah came to be. So next week, we're actually going to dive in and do this stuff for real. You can pick a translation, you can bring one, we can use the Eitz Chaim's. Part of the idea is that if people have different ones, that they can raise their hand and say, like, mine says this. And then we can figure it out. And we'll also, have the Hebrew here to get in on that. All right. We're starting in the beginning, which you will see most Jewish translations don't translate as in the beginning. But because I sit in the chair of Rabbi Ron Isaacs, I have to say that the Torah contains the most famous reference to baseball. In the beginning. You don't, I wouldn't be showing proper kavod to my predecessor if I don't do the baseball bit. So yes, it's World Series week in the beginning. Yes, so we'll see why, and that, by the way, is part of it. This in Hebrew, the first words of the Torah are grammatically incorrect. It does not make grammatical sense, which is like part of like what makes it a weird text. All right, that's it. Next week, same time. This weekend, come shul. Also,